Superman is the latest superhero film kicking off the brand new DCU. Now, this film is directed by James Gunn. And just to give us a refresher on the career that James Gunn has had, he was fired by Marvel after directing the first two Guardians of the Galaxies, then gets hired by the DCEU to direct the Suicide Squad, hired back by Disney and Marvel to direct Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and now he is head of the DC universe with his brand new film Superman to kick off the entire thing. Now, typically, James Gunn directs movies that are more team-oriented rather than a single protagonist, and this even goes back to his screenwriting days of the Scooby-Doo movies, and so I did have some curious reservations, I would say, in the way that Gunn would approach this character. Superman being such an iconic figure who certainly works within teams in different iterations, but this film felt like it needed to be something so special, not just the goofy tone that James Gunn often offers, but I was immediately shown how his style works perfectly well with both Clark Kent and the character of Superman. This is a film that really highlights Superman as an immigrant, an literal illegal alien, who creates a found family not so much different than Gunn highlights in his other films. He creates this found family with his Earth parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent, with his love interest, Lois Lane, and all of humanity as he tries to find where he fits in within this world. One of the biggest reasons why these ideas work so well is because the cast of this is absolutely incredible. David Corenswet is a great Superman. He's a person that I wasn't really aware of. I think Twisters was the only thing I actually saw him in. And so his acting in this film, I didn't have much to compare to. And maybe that was a benefit, but I thought he absolutely crushed the role of both Clark Kent and Superman. Rachel Brosnahan is another person who I hadn't seen a lot of her work, although I was much more familiar with her. But she is a great Lois Lane, and the chemistry that the two of them have on screen together are some of my favorite parts of this film. And then, of course, there's Nicholas Hault, who kind of rounds out the three leads in this film, playing Lex Luthor. And he is someone who I have seen in dozens of films up until this point. So I was very familiar in his style of acting, but even to that standard, I really think he outdid himself as being one of the best Lex Luthors I have ever seen. He is evil and vicious, and this movie doesn't shy away from that. And so the three of them leading this film really elevated it to another level. And of course, there are so many other supporting actors that you will recognize. James Gunn definitely has his guys that he likes to recast in all of his movies. But this movie wasn't perfect for me. And in fact, the biggest issues I had mostly involved the tone and pacing of it. This film immediately drops you into the action pretty much mid-story. This is not an origin film. If anything, it feels like a sequel, and you might be wondering if you missed out on previous events. And it's not a huge problem, especially for this character, because Superman is one that we've seen on screen so many times, and I would assume most people watching this movie have a good bare minimum knowledge of his origin. But because this is the first film set in this specific universe, there were definitely moments where I wanted a little bit more time to breathe and understand who these specific characters are. This film is very episodic in the sense that it's kind of moving from plot point to plot point. I've seen so many comparisons to it being a Saturday morning cartoon kind of featuring the monster of the week, and while those standout scenes do provide character development with the way that Superman and other characters are interacting with these monsters and villains, I do wish there was a little bit more of a continuous thread throughout all of these story points, because I do think there are several scenes within this movie that, as fun as they are, you could remove and it wouldn't affect the outcome. And so because of choices like that, this film does feel unlike any other superhero film you have seen before. And so it's hard to fully criticize that, because that is one of my favorite things filmmakers can do, to show me a unique vision that I haven't seen before on screen. And I'm not even saying I fully disliked it. I just felt because it was so new, something I had never seen before, it took a while for me to adjust, and I'm not even sure I'm fully there. And because of it being so fast-paced, I felt a little bit disconnected from the characters themselves, because my favorite moments of the movie was when they were just allowed to be characters, have conversation, talk about the themes of the movie, the themes that they are going through. But it felt like anytime the movie was having these quiet, intimate scenes, it was ended abruptly because we had to get to the next action scene, because there were so many more plot points and characters that we needed to introduce. But I do think the rewatchability on this will be high, because there were definitely things I missed, whether it be scenes that I forgot or lines of dialogue that just went way too fast over my head. And so already being removed from the film, I can see myself viewing it more highly than when I initially walked out of it. But another struggle that this movie has, which which isn't uncommon for superhero films, but it does really fight the urge to introduce just so many more characters and plot lines for future movies and spin-offs. But for the most part, I would say that it contained itself enough where most of the new things introduced and the world-building elements felt necessary to this specific story. As far as the themes and the overall message of this film goes, it has caused quite a bit of controversy, which isn't really surprising, especially if you even remotely touch current political issues. And most of the controversy comes from your interpretation of it and whether or not you think that it was an intentional metaphor being made. In my opinion, the preaching that this film is being accused of, I kind of wish they would have done more of. This film does have points to make, but they feel rather tame, and I think they could have even got harder. But I understand that's the business they're in, where they do want to somewhat satisfy everyone who's going to watch the movie. But before this film was even released, James Gunn was under a little bit of fire for calling Superman an immigrant. There are also masked government agents in this film who take him away, who a lot of people have compared to ICE. The two countries that are the center of this film's plot very much represent Israel and Palestine. And then there's Lex Luthor, who a lot of people are comparing to be an Elon Musk figure who's using his billions of dollars made in the tech industry to gain power and control within the government. And I'm not saying any of these points are or are not true, but I think this film is offering a great example how a lot of the audience are taking in their own worldview to this art, and therefore no one is really wrong, because these are honestly ideas that have existed for decades and centuries, and even within Superman we have seen him face similar issues through many different iterations of the character. And so why I think those things work in this film is that you can see the parallel to modern events, but I would argue that in 50 years when you watch this film, you will also find modern events to compare it to. Basically, all of these world issues are timeless, just as the character Superman is. The world is always going to need hope and a symbol that represents that. And James Gunn's version of Superman is this countercultural punk rocker who refuses to accept the doom and gloom fate of humanity. And honestly, that's kind of the Superman we need right now. So is this film the greatest superhero film ever? Absolutely not. I wouldn't even say it's the greatest Superman movie ever, but it's practically as good as you can get, all things considered. In my opinion, this is an absolute success in reigniting people's love for the character, and it's a brilliant start for the DCU. So those are some of my thoughts on James Gunn's Superman, but I would love to hear yours if you've seen the film. So please comment below, let me know what you think, and I will see you next time.